How are you? I'm Chief John Fine of the City of Burlington Police Department. The City of Burlington is rich in history. The first discussions of law enforcement presence in the city of Burlington goes as far back as 1796, and the City of Burlington Police Department, as we know it, being formed in 1836. With the amount of rich history, the important role of African American officers within our police department's culture resonates from the 1930s up to today. In this video, and in honor of Black History Month, we will visit the role of African American police officers played in our police department. We must honor those names and give the proper homage to each officer deserves. While many records have been destroyed, we have tried to piece together information we have along with speaking with retired officers, residents, and family members to put together this informative and so important piece of history that must not go unnoticed. Please join myself, Patrolman Najee Pruden, and Mayor Barry Conaway as we take a trip through time, recognizing the men and women of color in the City of Burlington Police Department. Thank you. With the City of Burlington Police Department being developed before the Civil War, law enforcement as we know it was much different. The police department had only a few what we would know as full-time police officers, with many other special police officers being picked up to work special duties or other details. Many times, being a special reserve police officer was a volunteer position, with the only opportunities to be paid is to be working sporting events or other special events, for example, the local bingo night. In 1935, Pringle Morris became the first African American law enforcement officer in the City of Burlington. Officer Morris was a well-respected man throughout the community and was known to be a go-to officer according to local residents. Officer Morris's son, Mr. Horace Morris, graduated from Burlington High School and was the first African American athlete to receive a scholarship for football at Syracuse University. Mr. Horace Morris returned back to the city, was a high school football coach, and became the principal of the Robert Stacy School, which was located where City Hall is at today. From 1935 to 1951, other African American Reserve police officers joined the ranks to include Officer James Durant, Officer Walter Rosser, Reserve Lieutenant David O'Farrow, and Officer Blake O'Farrow. Local residents and retired officers talk about Reserve Lieutenant David O'Farrow, citing he was one of the nicest men you'll ever want to meet. His brother, Officer Blake O'Farrow, a military veteran, was one of the first African American officers to work into a full-time police officer role, laying the groundwork for other African American police officers in the city going into the 1950s. Their legacy lives on, with family members still in public service, to include Councilwoman Sue Woodard, Police Chaplain Mark Warren, and Delanco Police Officer Basil Warren. Between these years and into the future, the City of Burlington was not immune to segregation and racism. While the police department was way ahead of time hiring African American police officers, social norms still became an obstacle for these pioneers in law enforcement profession. During the 1935 and 1950, African American officers were commonly sent into the area of the bars to deal directly with African American patrons and were told they could not arrest or cite any white person. Patrons visiting town, including soldiers, came from Camp Dix, who many times became disruptive in bar establishments and had to be arrested or removed from establishments. This changed under the direction of newly appointed Chief of Police, Peter J. Yingling. Chief Yingling was a military veteran who worked side by side with people of all walks of life. Described as a stern but fair man, by 1952, Chief Yingling made it known that African American officers under his watch will have broad authority to arrest and cite all persons violating the law, not just colored people. In addition to the groundwork working alongside newly appointed Reserve Lieutenant O'Farrow, the first full-time African American police officers were hired, with Officer Walter Borden in 1951, Officer Henry Duke Warren in 1954, and Officer Edward Mimi Hutton hired in August 1955. Reserve Officer Joseph Diggs was also hired during this time period. There was a story shared about Officer Warren where a young mother was in a grocery store at Route 130 and Federal Streets with her young child. At some point during the shopping, the young child walked away and went outside the store without the mother knowing. While the mother started to panic inside the store, she ran outside and found the child sitting in the front seat of Officer Warren's police vehicle. Duke, as the resident knew him, told her that he recognized the child from being from the neighborhood and was just waiting for the mother to come outside. This story was shared just recently about the efforts of Officer Henry Duke Warren. Other African American officers hired going into the 1960s include Officer Edward Haynes, hired in May 1960, who had a short career due to moving out of state, along with the grandfather of Lieutenant Kevin Johnson, Reserve Officer Darius White, hired in September 1963. After retiring, Reserve Officer White, known around town as Pop Pop, worked as a security guard at the bank on High Street. Another officer was Reserve Officer Leon Pittman, hired in November 1965. His daughter Valerie Pittman shared that in the photo displayed in this video, Reserve Officer Pittman was home in between jobs eating dinner just before going to the police station. She remembers this vividly because as a little girl, every time Reserve Officer Pittman would leave to go to the station, she would climb into a chair and blow into his police whistle. Reserve Officer Pittman told her he was one of the first graduates of the newly organized Burlington County Police Academy. From the late 1960s into the 1970s, the City of Burlington Police Department continued progress and the change of leadership from Chief of Police Peter J. Yingling to Chief of Police George Clayton. Chief Clayton was another progressive law enforcement professional who continued the role of integration during the civil rights movements, riots, and racial discord nationally. Other African American officers hired during this time included Officer Donald Traynor Sr., hired in January of 1969, and Reserve Officer Ed Catlett, hired in March 1971. Numerous residents remember both officers as being really nice and good police officers. Reserve Officer Joseph Champ Branham, hired in March 1971, was another well-known and respected police officer in the city of Burlington. Officer Branham was named Champ after a very successful boxing career before coming to the police department. He lived initially on Stacy Street and then in Stacy Court until his death in 2009. A very kind man that will be missed by many. From 1975 on to recent years, badge numbers were issued by Chief Clayton, with many officers hired in the 1950s and 1960s receiving new badge numbers. In this next part of the video, many African American officers will be honored by their badge number as once received upon being hired full-time, along with current and reserve officers who dedicated over 10 years of service to our community.
Under the authority of Chief George Clayton, the City of Burlington Police Department recycled badge numbers in order to accurately identify officers with accuracy. This system that Chief Clayton put in place is followed today, with Chief Clayton being badge 9001. The following African American officers were given badge numbers, and we will acknowledge each officer as follows. Badge 9005, Lieutenant Edward Mimi Hutton Jr., hired August 16, 1955. Edward S. Hutton Jr., also known in the community as Mimi, graduated from Burlington City High School in 1949. He attended Morris Brown College in Atlanta, Georgia, and eventually enlisted in the U.S. Army National Guard and the Army Reserves for 8 years. Sometime in 1954, Ed Hutton would join the Burlington City Police Department, where he eventually retired as a police lieutenant after 27 years of service. During his tenure on the BCPD, he also graduated from the FBI Superior Officer Program and also helped to start up a police athletic league boxing gym at the Union Hall on Stacy Street with the help of Detective Gene Massamy. Developing a program to teach boxing and mentor the youth in Burlington City at no cost, being an avid boxer and having boxed in Germany during the war of boxing, and teaching boxing became one of his passions in life. Ed Mimi Hutton was also the owner of Hutton Moving and Hauling for 48 years after being left the business by his father, Edward Hutton Sr. Married to the love of his life, Catherine, Edward later became the recipient of the Burlington City Brotherhood Award for his outstanding community service and for being a great role model and mentor. Lieutenant Hutton is a descendant of Oliver Cromwell, who was a Revolutionary War hero from Burlington who crossed the Delaware River with George Washington. Lieutenant Edward Mimi Hutton died on November 29, 2018. Badge 9032, Lieutenant Kevin Johnson, hired in 1977. Lieutenant Kevin Johnson has a distinguished career with the City of Burlington Police Department. Lieutenant Johnson served his career mostly in the Patrol Division, but also served in the Detective Bureau and with the Burlington County Narcotics Task Force. He was a Federal Aviation Administration licensed pilot and volunteered with the City Office of Emergency Management after he retired. Lieutenant Johnson passed away in January 2017 and was promoted to the rank of lieutenant after his death by then Chief Alan R. Snow. Badge 9039, Detective Michael Himes, hired February 1980. Detective Michael Himes initially started his career with the New Jersey State Police prior to becoming a City of Burlington police officer. During his career, Detective Himes presented himself with professionalism and class while being a mentor to numerous officers throughout his career. Detective Himes is retired and still lives in the Burlington area. Badge 9040. Patrolman Edward Hutton III, hired in 1982. Patrolman Edward Hutton served with the City Police Department for 10 years, primarily in the Patrol Division. Known for his knowledge of local residents and his personality, Patrolman Hutton's career fell short after an injury forced him to retire in 1992. Patrolman Hutton visited Burlington from time to time during his retirement. Badge 9041. Patrolman Gary Daniels, hired in 1982. Patrolman Daniels initially started his law enforcement career with the Burlington County Prosecutor's Office before coming to the City of Burlington Police Department. Patrolman left the City of Burlington Police Department to go back to the Burlington County Prosecutor's Offices and subsequently served as the Chief of Detectives for the Burlington County Prosecutor's Office, and also served as the Burlington County Sheriff for 6 years during his career. Sheriff Daniels had since retired and has opened up a private practice law firm in Mount Holly. Badge 9044. Detective Robert Bobby Dickerson. Detective Robert Bobby Dickerson began his career with the City of Burlington Police Department as a reserve officer in 1975 and went to the West Hampton Township Police Department in 1977. Detective Dickerson came back to the City of Burlington as a patrol officer in 1982. Detective Dickerson had a legendary career with the City of Burlington, becoming a household name in defining community policing within the city. Detective Dickerson was involved in several major crimes investigations and is still asked about by residents to this day. Detective Dickerson is retired and lives locally in the City of Burlington. Badge 9084. Patrolman Jeffrey Burkett. Patrolman Jeffrey Burkett began his career with the Essex County Sheriff's Department prior to transferring to the City of Burlington Police Department in 2007. Patrolman Burkett worked in the Patrol Division and was a great influence to many residents of whom he served. Patrolman Burkett is a military veteran and was a great mentor to young officers. Patrolman Burkett's wife, Michelle, was a Burlington County Sheriff's officer. Patrolman Burkett retired in 2017 and is currently living in the state of Texas. Badge 9087. Patrolman Clifford Wingo. Patrolman Clifford Wingo began his law enforcement career with the Burlington County Sheriff's Department and was hired in the City of Burlington under Chief Lazzarotti. During his career, Patrolman Wingo was assigned to the Patrol Division. Patrolman Wingo retired due to an injury and is currently a teacher at a charter school in the city of Philadelphia. Badge 9098. Patrolman Benny Langford Jr. Patrolman Benny Langford came to the City of Burlington, hired by Chief Anthony Wallace after serving with the Wildwood, Willingboro, and Wilmington, Delaware Police Department. Patrolman Langford served in the Patrol Division and was a school research officer in the City of Burlington School District. Patrolman Langford was one of the organizers of the City of Burlington Police Explorers and Youth Police Academy. Patrolman Langford retired from the City of Burlington Police Department and is currently a law enforcement officer in the state of Florida. Badge 9102. Corporal Lisa Tisby. Corporal Lisa Tisby transferred to the City of Burlington Police Department from Alongside Police Department in Camden County. Corporal Tisby grew up and served with the Kansas City Police Department prior to her service with the City of Burlington. Corporal Tisby is a tremendous mentor for young officers, has participated in the GREAT program in the City of Burlington School District, promoted to the rank of Corporal in 2021, and is currently assigned to the Patrol Division. Corporal Tisby is the first African female full-time police officer and police supervisor in the City of Burlington Police Department history. Badge 9108. Patrolman Willie Duga. Patrolman Willie Duga started his career as a special law enforcement officer with the City of Burlington Police Department. Patrolman Duga is currently assigned to the Patrol Division and is a member of the City of Burlington Police Honor Guard. Patrolman 9109. Patrolman Nigel Pruden. Patrolman Nigel Pruden grew up in the city and graduated from the Burlington City High School, winning a state basketball champion in 2022 and forgoing his career as a football player at Kent State University. Patrolman Pruden is a Gracie Survivor Tactic instructor and is currently assigned to the Patrol Division. Badge 9113. Patrolman Roosevelt McKinney. Patrolman Roosevelt McKinney was recently hired in 2022 after serving as a New Jersey State Correction Police Officer. Born and raised in the City of Burlington, Patrolman McKinney is currently attending the Camden County Police Academy. Reserve Lieutenant Frederick Hatton. Reserve Lieutenant Frederick Hatton began his career in August 1982. During his career, Lieutenant Hatton was assigned to the Reserve Unit along with traffic enforcement. Lieutenant Hatton was instrumental in the development of young officers, many of whom are serving as full-time Burlington City police officers, to include members of the command staff and Chief Fine. Lieutenant Hatton retired and lives in the Burlington area. Reserve Patrolman Bernard Freeman. Reserve Patrolman Bernard Freeman was hired in 2006 and served 14 years in the City of Burlington Police Reserve Unit. Reserve Patrolman Freeman provided security at special sporting events and also completed patrols in the business district. Reserveman Patrolman Freeman resigned and is working full-time with the City of Burlington Water and Sewer Department on a full-time basis. Reserveman Patrol Marla Freeman. Reserveman Patrol Marla Freeman was hired in 2006 and served 3 years with the City of Burlington Police Department. Reserve Patrolman Freeman was the first African-American female officer in the City of Burlington Police Department and worked special events and court proceedings in the City Patrol. Patrolman Freeman resigned due to health concerns and still resides in the Burlington area. Reserve Patrol Justin Pierce. Reserve Patrol Justin Pierce was hired in 2017 as a special law enforcement officer assigned to the Reserve Unit. Reserve Patrol Pierce works full-time with the Consolidated Edison Company of New York, where he is a technician on the hazmat team. Reserve Patrol Pierce resides in the City of Burlington and is patrolling the downtown business district and can be seen at sporting events. Reserve Patrol Tamara Bivens. Reserve Patrol Tamara Bivens was hired in 2021 as a special law enforcement officer and is assigned to the Reserve Unit. A former City of Burlington police explorer, Reserve Patrol Bivens is currently attending the College of New Jersey for nursing and is involved in the Army ROTC program. Reserve Patrol Bivens is commonly assigned to the downtown business district along with providing security at special and sporting events.
Hello, Burlington City. I'm Mayor Barry Conaway, Public Safety Director. We hope you enjoyed this video that explored the lives of the African American law enforcement officers within the Burlington City Police Department. We want to show the diversity of the police department through its history, and we thank those officers for their willingness to protect and to serve our community. Thank you.